All right, so my group chose to do an environmental crisis that's currently plaguing California, which are wildfires. And I'm going to jump into some of the contributing factors. So kind of spanned out, first we're going to be looking at population. So the population of California has actually increased a good amount in the last 60 years. We went from being about 25 million people living in California to 40 million. So when people started populating California, we started moving further and further out into the woodland areas, into the forested areas. Builders, families, communities started kind of just encroaching on our forested areas. And because of that, for one, more people means more accidental fires being started. And two, when we have more people within our forested areas, we're not allowing the natural fires to burn anymore because we want to protect, obviously, the communities and the people living in those areas. So usually back when we weren't as populated, way before probably inhabitants settled in California, wildfires or natural fires were a natural part of the ecosystem. And when we're not allowing those fires to burn, we're actually leaving a lot more of like the dead vegetation and debris on the floors of the forest. And when those start adding up, it's actually adding more destruction in the future because that stuff is lighting up and taking, going out of control. Another thing that I kind of wanted to zoom in on is how wildfires are actually pretty essential to a lot of different ecosystems. And when we're not allowing these natural fires to occur, some plants can't even propagate or continue. For example, manzanita trees, scrub oak, and there's actually quite a few plants that need fires to actually release their cones, release their seeds to germinate and to reproduce. And then another ecosystem that is highly affected by these natural fires, which we are not allowing to burn, are our animals. Actually, when fires burn through naturally, it actually provides a more nutrient based system for these animals to come back, to thrive, for new plant life to take off, and as well as it cleans up a lot of that dead debris on the floor, on the forest floor, that's not happening at the moment. And from there, we're going to talk about some more contributing factors.
Okay, so I'll cover one of the main contributing factors to the increase of wildfires in California. As most of us know, climate change is actually happening. Even though sometimes people try to say otherwise, but there have been a lot of studies, a lot of research done that proves that it's actually happening. And one of the key factors of wildfires is actually climate change. Surprisingly, more than 80% of the wildfires are caused by people, according to the EPA. So how do we actually contribute to climate change and hence increase the wildfires happening? Next slide, Kate, sorry.
Oh, there it goes. Sorry, I was stuck.
So we've heard about the greenhouse effect. A greenhouse is pretty much a building made out of glass. The glass walls actually trap the heat inside the greenhouse, and that's what keeps whatever's inside the greenhouse warm, even when it's super cold outside. It's mostly used for plants. So the gases in the atmosphere actually work like a greenhouse that trap the heat into our earth, keeping it warm and cozy for most of us. Next slide, Kate. So what we do actually is what contributes to the increase of the temperature of our planet. Carbon is actually one of the most important gases in the atmosphere that helps Earth remain warm, and it's got a cycle. I wanted to talk a little bit about it because thanks to chemistry, we actually know how carbon cycles in Earth and why carbon is actually so important for existence and why carbon makes actually Earth unique from the rest of the planets in our universe. So basically, land plants, they use carbon to turn it into sugar and carbohydrates. They use it for growth and reproduction. Then some plants get eaten by, land organisms, and once they metabolize the plants, the carbon returns to the earth, and then carbon goes back into the environment either by air, earth, or water. From that point, we can extract carbon when it's in the earth. That's what we know about. That's what we know as fossil fuels, which is pretty much coal, oil, and natural gases happening in the crust of the earth. But what's important to know about that is that 80% of the carbon that's actually on Earth, it's found in the crust of the Earth. And knowing that, it's actually key to understand what we can do in order to reduce the levels of carbon. So most of the reactions that involve carbon are actually redox reaction. That relates to chemistry again. One popular reaction is combustion, specifically the one for methane, which is the key factor for gasoline. We use a lot of gasoline, especially here in California, those of us who commute a lot. And going back to the carbon, we are putting more carbon into the atmosphere, into the air. That just increases the levels of carbon into the atmospheres, hence increasing the temperature of the earth because there's more CO2 trapping heat in our earth.
So thank you, Mauricio and Kay, for helping us to define global warming, wildfire, and the contributing factor. It's really informative. And to support my groupmate point of view of how important the problem is, my job is to analyze the pros and cons to see if it's worth our concern. So first, we're talking about the pros. Global warming can be a really helpful tool for us. Whenever you're hungry, you just can go outside and fry egg directly on the road. You don't need to pay for gas bill anymore because your pavement or your rooftop will be your best cast iron or air fryer. Same thing with your mailbox or your new microwave. Especially your new microwave, expect to get some hot mail on the way. And if you enjoy being out of breath, the feeling after you're running for 10 seconds, you get what you want, away oxygens and give you more CO2, so you get that feeling more often. And global warming makes the Statue of Liberty look so much more liberatory and sexy, which attract more tourists, and also it make a big evolution to the fashions. I don't even know what coming next after the big wild stuff of 2006. And last but not least, there will be no more tragic accidents such as the sink of Titanic because the ice block is already melted. Perhaps Rose and Jack could be together for a bit longer after the breakup, the moment the Titanic arrived in New York, because what happens in Atlantic stay in Atlantic. But if the boat do sink, Jack will not gonna die because the ocean is like a hot jacuzzi, and perhaps Rose can join with him and freak him out by talking about him when we final scene. With these, I'm just kidding. So this is just all the joke, but if we're talking about the cons, there will be no more joke because global warming seriously takes away the home of animals, and next is our home, or it's already dead, then our environment. Last but not least, I think our life too, because the earth does give us some sign through the nature disasters such as tornado, flood, drought, and leak so much tragic story. As you can see, that polar bear is missing their house. So you can see there's, especially in California, wildfires is always a problem that has never been solved. Climate change, global warming is making the environment drier. A single spark, which could be an arson accidental, can cause a huge fire or a mega fire, and that is going to be out of control. Or you guys remember last year, I think December 2020, when you wake up and you think it's the end of the world because everything is covered in orange, smoke and ash everywhere, which is terrible. So if we want to live in a safe environment, we gotta do something, and my groupmate Christian will inform you guys more about that on this next slide. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Christian. So I'm going to be discussing the solutions to wildfires. So just kind of reiterating what Kate and Mac talked about. It's kind of a tricky situation because on one hand, wildfires do cause a lot of damage to our homes and to businesses, and they do raise the AQI, which causes health problems for humans. But on the other end, wildfires are also an essential part of a lot of ecosystems, like Kate talked about, and they are required for a lot of plants to go through their full cycle. So we pretty much need a solution that satisfies both problems. Next slide. And that kind of goes on to controlled fires. So kind of like the name, controlled fires are when you have a group of experts set up a time, date, and they do all the research on the weather conditions, and they pretty much set up a controlled burn. So this kind of, it's about the best of both worlds. So they're not completely out of control like the regular wildfires we're used to seeing that cause millions in property damage. But on the other side, they do also allow for these ecosystems to get the fire that they need. Next slide. And then going into deeper about controlled fires, they're really safe. Less than 1% of controlled fires escape containment. And then they don't raise the AQI insanely high like how we've seen before in other California wildfires. They also, like Kate talked about previously, they also help prevent the larger uncontrolled wildfires because they do burn up a lot of that dry bush and vegetation that acts as fuel for real wildfires. It helps to keep the fire on the ground instead of climbing up to trees and spreading even faster. So really is the best solution. When you look at all the other possible solutions, you can always enforce harsher penalties and stricter rules for people whose negligence causes wildfires. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be people that don't necessarily care and will make mistakes. Next slide.
Okay, and then I'm going to bring it back around to some solutions to help slowing global warming, which is one of the major contributors to California wildfires. But it's not going to be like a one-size-fits-all overnight fix. It's going to take a lot of cooperation between individuals, businesses, states, countries, but it is possible to decrease the damage global warming is inflicting. Some of these solutions that you can see here that I'm sure you've heard a lot of before is to try and drive electric vehicles, try to switch to renewable sources of energy like solar or wind energy, start insulating your homes better so you don't need to be using as much energy, and planting more trees is a possibility to counterbalance the carbon dioxide emissions. And we can also help to support the businesses that are using and promoting sustainable energy. And if you wanted to learn a little bit more what you could do on an individual level to help reduce global warming and to help reduce the effects of our drought, we listed some links here so you could do a little deeper investigation on your end. And there's our sources. And that's it.